Today, we are diving into a geopolitical mystery that's just hiding in plain sight, right in the heart of Tokyo. We're talking about a whole community that's fiercely loyal to North Korea, operating inside one of its biggest enemies.
Okay, just picture this for a second. A school in Japan where kids sing the North Korean national anthem. Every morning, they learn that their true fatherland is the regime of Kim Jong-un. And get this, these kids weren't born in North Korea. They were born and raised in Japan. It seems impossible, right?
So this raises a huge, and you could say, pretty dangerous question. It's really the question that's going to guide us through this whole story. How on earth can a country like Japan tolerate what looks like a state-sponsored threat operating right under its nose? Well, the answer is way more complex than you might think. To really get what's happening, we first need to look at the community behind these schools. And it's not just a few schools we're talking about. It's an entire, powerful, far-reaching network. So the ethnic Korean community in Japan is known as Zainichi, which literally just means residing in Japan. And they're basically split. On one side, you've got Mindan, who are loyal to South Korea. But on the other side, you have Chongryon. They're the pro-North Korean group, and they are at the absolute center of this whole story. And believe me, they operate as a lot more than just a community group.
Yeah, Chongryon isn't just some cultural club. Intelligence officials describe it as a full-on network for espionage and illegal activities that directly fund the North Korean regime. The allegations are, well, they're staggering. We're talking university professors caught acting as spies, a senior North Korean intelligence officer being found in a top leadership post. And maybe the most shocking thing? A North Korean missile scientist told the U.S. Congress that 90% of the regime's missile parts were smuggled from Japan, with Chongryon's help.
And the money, oh the money. The scale of the funding is just massive. Through a network of businesses, a lot of them shady, like pachinko parlors, Chongryon was sending hundreds of millions of dollars to Pyongyang. At its peak in the 90s, some reports estimated the profits being funneled to North Korea were double that of Japan's entire car industry at the time. Just think about that.
So the obvious question is, why doesn't Japan just ban them? Shut them down, right? Well, that's where things get tricky. In a modern democracy, you can't just suppress groups you don't like. So instead, the government has to use more subtle tools, things like surveillance, cutting subsidies, diplomatic pressure. It's kind of a perfect example of how the freedoms of an open society can be used against it.
But to really understand why thousands of people would pledge their loyalty to such a brutal dictatorship, we have to rewind. We have to go back and look at a really painful history that created this deep wound, this vacuum of identity. So this timeline really lays out the trauma. From 1910 to 1945, Japan didn't just occupy Korea. It tried to completely erase its identity, banning the language, forcing people to take Japanese names. Millions were brought to Japan as forced labor. But then, when the war ended, you'd think they'd be liberated. But no, they were trapped. Japan stripped them of their rights and legally declared them aliens in the only country they'd ever known. And the cruelty of that colonial era was just profound. It included forcing up to 400,000 women and girls like Lee Okson into sexual slavery in what they called comfort stations. And over 100,000 Korean men were forced to fight and die for the Japanese Empire. So after the war, they weren't treated like victims. They were treated like liabilities. They faced systemic persecution. They were barred from good jobs, paid less than Japanese workers, and pushed to the absolute fringes of society. And they were given this official title, Special Permanent Residence. Think about that. It's basically a constant reminder, you can live here, but you will never, ever belong.
You can imagine this created a massive existential crisis. I mean, put yourself in their shoes. You're born in a country that refuses to call you its own, but you're also completely disconnected from an ancestral homeland you've never even seen. It created this deep, painful vacuum of identity, and it left an entire community totally vulnerable, just searching for an anchor.
And it was right into this vacuum that North Korea stepped. Not with aid, really, but with something way more powerful. A psychological weapon. The promise of an identity, a home, and dignity.
So in the late 1950s, North Korea launches this huge propaganda campaign. They painted this picture of a utopian fatherland, a worker's paradise. Through magazines, pamphlets, community meetings, they promised Zainichi everything they were denied in Japan. A home, security, education, and the most important thing of all, a proud identity as a true Korean. And tragically, it worked.
Between 1959 and 1984, nearly 100,000 people, just desperate for a place to belong, boarded ships for a home they'd only seen in propaganda posters. They honestly thought they were sailing towards their destiny.
But the paradise was a total lie. The second they arrived, their dreams were just shattered. They weren't met with open arms, they were met with suspicion. They were trapped, used for their skills, pushed down to the lowest social class, and placed under constant state surveillance. They'd basically traded a life as outsiders in Japan for a life as prisoners in their so-called fatherland.
Okay, so here's the crucial point. Even after this catastrophic betrayal became known, after the horrors of North Korea were exposed to the world, why does this fierce loyalty still exist today? Why are those schools in Tokyo still operating?
Well, the answer is in a powerful and sometimes kind of dangerous quirk of human psychology. Neuroscience shows us that our brains aren't really designed to seek objective truth first. They are hardwired first and foremost to preserve our identity and our sense of belonging. In fact, social rejection lights up the same parts of the brain as physical pain. Belonging literally equals survival to our brain.
So this three-step process explains pretty much everything. First, you experience this profound social rejection. Second, a group comes along and offers you the one thing you crave most: acceptance, a clear identity, and a story that makes you a hero, not a victim. And third, your brain latches on to that identity like a lifeline, and it will do anything to protect it, even if that means ignoring inconvenient or even horrific truths.
And this right here is the heart of it. The community knows about the concentration camps, the public executions, the starvation. But like one member said, any country has human rights issues. See, for them, the psychological pain of having no identity, of being nobody, is simply greater than the mental gymnastics of belonging to a deeply flawed one. That identity is just too important to give up.
And look, this isn't just some strange North Korean story. It's a deeply human one. This weaponizing of identity is a pattern we have seen again and again throughout history. It was the engine for Nazi Germany, for Genghis Khan's empire, for Stalin's brutal purges. When a powerful identity is offered to a group that feels lost, it can be used to justify almost anything.
And this brings the whole question right back to all of us. It's a provocative thought, for sure, but it's a necessary one. We all belong to groups, political, social, national. And this story is a powerful reminder that the line between loyalty and blindness is something we all have to navigate. It kind of forces us to ask ourselves, what truths are we willing to overlook for the comfort of belonging?